My guest today is Elizabeth Lance, a doctoral candidate in education whose research examines how Ontario's school safety policies are actually being implemented and how artificial intelligence can be used to detect systemic patterns of non-compliance. Her findings, by the way, can be found online at www.schoolboardresearch.ca. And I'm also very pleased to say that she's an HSA Parent Alliance contributor supporting the important work we're doing here with the Whole Schools Accountable Parent Network. So welcome, Elizabeth. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you. It's great to be here today.
I find your work truly fascinating. Going through all the valuable information, and there's so much to dig into. So maybe we'll start by explaining how you utilized AI in your research and how does it spot the gaps that people might miss?
Absolutely. So, AI is a tool like any other, but what it does is it helps speed up what someone would normally do and allows you to do more things than you would otherwise. So, under normal circumstances, a policy analyst would go and find each policy and read all of them. But there are 72 school boards, and there are literally thousands of pages of policies. So AI lets us find the right policies faster, go through them using strict rules, and then the human element comes in just to double check that everything is in there. So AI is letting us do now the kind of analysis that we couldn't do before because of the sheer volume of information and the time required.
Yeah. And how reliable would you say it is compared to, say, a manual review? And you've added that, the human eye also goes over this data.
It does. There's always the human check that has to go into any system. It's fairly reliable because it does have strict rules in place. It'll look for things that even a human reviewer might gloss over, soft language or deferring to another document. One of the challenges with AI right now, especially the generative AIs, is sometimes it's a little too nice. It will err on the side of saying something's there, so you do have to double check it. But the policies, in terms of the reliability checks that we're doing, it's quite good. It's only occasionally that I have to step in and say, actually, I don't agree with this assessment. And it does speed things up considerably.
And you've outlined in great detail on your website some of the safe school policies, as you call it, the backbone of Ontario's safe school framework. And this is something that all parents should really have a look at. But some of the things it includes is PPM 128. There's also bullying prevention and intervention, which is PPM 144, and progressive discipline and promoting positive student behavior, that's PPM 145. So are these some of the policies that you based your research criteria from in terms of what you were focusing in on?
Absolutely. As a parent, I wanted to find this information initially, and I struggled to find it within my own school board. And that led me to ask how many other parents are actually struggling with this. So I found these three policies that are the backbone of the safe school policies,
Yeah.
and I started to go through them. I'm still partway through all three, but I've completed one initial and halfway through the second. So we have a good sample size at this point. The code of conduct,
Yeah.
which was updated in 2024, is probably one of the more interesting ones because it's very visible. And that I was able to pull down the policies for 60 school boards. So that's all the English, public, and Catholic school boards for this analysis.
Mhm. And you mentioned 60 school boards, so that's almost all of them. There's 72 in the province. And your initial findings are extremely disturbing. So can you break it down for us?
Sure. I mean, for the code of conduct policies, 55 out of 60 boards, so 90%,
Mhm.
showed at least one clear failure on the five must have criterias that I'd selected for this initial review. And, put another way, only 5 out of 60 boards met all of the five requirements. So that's a huge fail rate.
Mhm.
Over 90% are missing at least one criteria.
So you actually started to dig deeper into, say, five select criteria. Can you highlight some of those and what do you think are some of the most critical? I mean, in the broader sense, they're all critical because it's about keeping our kids safe. Give us a highlight and what you think were really, really standing out.
Absolutely. So I chose five of the must or shall statements in two of the policies that I've gone through so far, the code of conduct and the bullying. And code of conduct, I was looking for, is it publicly accessible? Do they have signage in school entrances? Is there a reporting mechanism for parents? Do they have implementation procedures? And is cyberbullying listed? Because that's a
Mhm.
huge issue right now. For the bullying one, I also looked at similar categories. So, public accessibility of the policy as well as the plan, and a clear path for parents on how to report bullying, what happens after reporting, parent escalation, and then how parents are notified if a bullying incident occurs at school. So, really looking at it from the parent's perspective in terms of what they can expect from the school boards or what they should expect from the school boards based on these policies. And I got to say, I was really disappointed by the entire experience. um, Trying to find these policies first and foremost was challenging. So the accessibility of the policies was an issue. Around 1 in 6 of the code of conduct policies weren't accessible online. About 1 in 4 didn't meet all the requirements for the bullying policies. So they'll say there's a policy, they'll say there's a plan, but you can't find it on the website. 4 out of 5 boards didn't have a clear way for parents to report a code of conduct violation. For bullying reports, over half lacked a way for parents to report bullying of their children. Only 1 in 5 had a clear explanation of what happened when a report was submitted. And almost two-thirds had no clear escalation route. So if you're not satisfied with the resolution, there's no clear process for what happens next. And keep in mind, this is a good sample
Mhm.
size. It's all 60 of the public and English boards for the code of conduct, and half of them, so 30 extensive policies for bullying. And we're seeing these sorts of results that show that parents aren't getting access to the information or resources they need to help their kids at school.
Well, if you're having a challenge and you're researching this, where you're actually spending detailed time, what about the average parent or a single parent, working 3 jobs? Um, how do they navigate through this? And I think it's such a serious breach of trust. If school boards aren't following provincial policies, someone needs to step in here, and that includes the minister. And at issue here, I think, is that there are no consequences. This really needs to be addressed, especially when you talk about bullying. So you mentioned, what was the figure again for actually reporting a bullying incident? What was that figure again?
So over half lacked a defined reporting path for parents for bullying. Some of the school boards have these incredible portals, and I applaud those, but the majority don't. It either says talk to your teacher, talk to your principal, or it says nothing at
Mm-hmm.
all.
And can you give us a contrast? You mentioned some have exceptional descriptions on the website. What should be there?
Well, we live in a digital age now. I don't think there's any excuse for not having a digital way of reporting or someone you can directly call to report an incident. All the boards are given at least $2 million a year for administration, and some of the boards have really put it to great use here. And you can see it's as simple as an anonymous form. What happened, who was involved, details
Yeah.
that they can then take action on if a teacher hasn't observed it. So, there really should be that digital way of communicating or a clear
At the
contact.
very least, anyway, right? At the bare minimum, there should be some sort of avenue or platform that a parent can say, look, this is a concern. And that in itself sort of elevates it. But of course, there has to be follow up. And that's another mountain that we're climbing here. I'm wondering when we talk about reforming a public education system, you know, there should be actually maybe multiple layers, and I wanted to get your take on this. An independent oversight body, maybe there's a mandatory public reporting on compliance. That should be, everybody should be aware of what's happening. And maybe as an extension to that, legislated penalties. Maybe there's a funding consequence for noncompliance. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on something like that.
As a parent who's gone through this as well as a researcher, I can say that a patchwork right now, and it's very frustrating trying to figure out who you can report to. And the first step in any solution is making clear who is responsible and who you can talk to directly or contact directly if there's an issue, and who will take action. Exactly what's supposed to be in these
Yeah.
policies, right? I don't know exactly what that would look like, but I would like to think that it's well advertised on the Ontario website,
Yeah.
who to contact and so on. Because right now it gets delegated all the way back down to the classroom teacher if there's a
Yeah.
problem. And classroom teachers have a lot on their plates already. They shouldn't be trying to administer
Yeah.
policies or try and correct things that their board is missing.
Well, and I have to say it. I think there's some intent here. By keeping the process vague or incomplete, it allows the schools to control the narrative when something goes wrong. And that lack of clarity is a tool to avoid accountability. And, there's just been too many incidents that prove that. And it's been going on for so long, and it needs to stop. So when we have ministry mandated policies, um, they are meaningless if there are no consequences if nobody's following them at the end of the day. And we both know, doing research, printing out forms, looking at this website, I mean, the pile is high of policies and jargon, but there is no real transparency and accountability of it being followed.
No, there's no transparency and no accountability. We have certain things that are being reported right now, but a report card that shows how well schools actually implement these policies doesn't currently exist. And being able to see how well your school and how seriously your school board takes these responsibilities is important. It's that duty of care that you've talked about. For 7 hours a day, I hand my child over to the education system and I'm entrusting them with my child's life.
Mm,
And policies have real world consequences. So I know we think this is all theoretical, but there have been deaths in the Ontario school system because of policies that we either not implemented or poorly implemented. So making sure that these are in place,
yeah.
they're followed, and they're well structured is absolutely critical.
One of the things that you mentioned about public accessibility, so I wanted to bring this and put a spotlight on it. One of the things that a parent can do, and we've had chats offline about this, but is to look for that code of conduct sign that is supposed to be publicly displayed. And it is so much more than a sign, isn't it?
It's a framework for behavior, and it's laying out the expectations, and it's a symbol of what the board prioritizes and the school prioritizes. We have to think of it like a cultural artifact. We track what we value. And I know there are two school boards where I reside. And when I go to the different schools for various activities, there's one board where they have it clearly displayed in the window of the door when I walk in. You cannot miss it. You walk into the school, these are the behavioral expectations. Meanwhile, the other school board, it's invisible. And I know, I mean, from personal experience, I brought that to the attention of the board and they said it wasn't relevant. So, it's a cultural artifact as well. You can see what they value based on what is visible. And we've chatted about this as well, is that there are similar requirements in other environments. So in workplaces, the Workplace
Yep.
Hazardous Materials Information System, so WMIS, you have to put up signs. It's a safety issue, and you will be fined if you don't. But who do
Yeah.
you contact if your school board isn't following school policies and posting this in the entryways?
And do we have the answer to that? Who do we contact?
In theory, you contact the director of education, you contact the
Yeah.
superintendent, but if they're not following it, then who do you go to? You go to the Ontario Ombudsman, but they
Right.
have limited scope. Or you try and find the Ministry of Education representative, and they also have limited scope, and they continuously refer you back to your school board. So it
Mhm.
has to come from somewhere else at this point because it's not coming from the existing systems.
Can I ask you, a little bit about your personal story, the fact that you did bring it to the attention of, was it the administrator or right to the board in terms of that policy not
So
posted?
we went from the bottom all the way up. So it was, we mentioned that there wasn't clear behavioral expectations in the classroom. We mentioned that it wasn't being communicated at the school level, even though other messages were being communicated. We brought it to the attention of the superintendent, who said that even if they sent out the code of conduct every day, it wouldn't necessarily matter. That's his opinion, but at least you should try. And then we also wrote not once but twice to our director of education to bring it to his attention as well, and we got redirected back down. So we went all the way up through it, and here we are more than a year later, and it's still not part of the policies, and it's still not posted in the schools.
Wow. And this is mandated.
It is mandated, but laws without enforcement mean nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. Can I ask you, through your research then, have you been able to navigate then, for parents listening right now, so who is approving these policies and implementing them? Is there a straightforward path of what's supposed to happen?
Well, in theory, what happens is that the ministry looks at the various laws that are in place, what they need to do, what they want to do.
Mm-hmm.
I know the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario fought for the code of conducts to be posted in schools as part of their collective bargaining. So they then write policies, and those are supposed to be reviewed by boards, including the Director of Education, and then implemented. The challenge is that there's a lack of clarity at that level right now. But ultimately, the director of education is the CEO of these multi-million dollar and billion dollar corporations, and it starts and ends with them. They are responsible for it, and if they find that there are any shortcomings, it's their responsibility to bring it to the board. And if the board and the director of education can't resolve it, it is their responsibility to take it to the minister of education. So there are lots of things that should be happening, but we have to take a look at, who's ultimately responsible. And if you look at any job description for the director of education, it's in their job description that this is their responsibility.
Can I ask you what surprised you the most through your research?
Oh, there were three things really that jumped out at me. First was the disconnect between what schools proclaim were a safe, caring, inclusive environment, and that's not reflected in their policy documents. The second was just how inconsistent it was across the board. We had small boards that did a phenomenal job of implementing things. We had some big boards that did a great job of it. And then there was everything else in between, people who didn't upload it at all. And that leads into the last point, which is the accessibility divide. So, not posting it online, boards posting scanned images instead of PDFs. So if you need screen reader technology, you can't read what's on the screen. It's buried on the website, or it's just not accessible, and that's an equity issue hiding in plain sight. Parents should be able to access board policies with ease.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to definitely, relay the boards that had zero compliance.
So, in relation to the code of conduct, the ones that failed on all 5 points that we were checking for were Bruce Grey Catholic, Great Essex County, London District Catholic School Board, Simcoe Muskoka Catholic District School Board, and the Toronto Catholic District School Board. So it was a range, but those were the ones where we couldn't find the policies. If the policies did exist, they were missing those key criteria.
And it should be noted, the Toronto Catholic District School Board is one of the school boards that were taken over by the ministry, right? Supervisors being brought in. So it's starting to show, I mean, there's a pattern there, whether it's financial mismanagement or noncompliance, it just starts to really show that how pervasive some of the issues are at hand. Are there any other stats that you want to reveal that you found startling?
I think I've covered most of them, but the one thing that I
Okay.
want to drive home is that some of these policies are not new. So, the bullying prevention and intervention policy went into effect in November of 2021. So, some of these policies have been sitting neglected and no one has checked to see if they comply since that time. The other one is the code of conduct. Again, it's been over a year. And one of the requirements that I want to bring up again is cyberbullying. That came into the policies, quite a ways back, 2019, possibly even earlier, and it's not in the code of conduct for a number of boards. Bullying, AI bullying, there's so much here, and it's a hot topic, and it's important that we have the frameworks in place. And I think it's inexcusable that some of these documents don't include it.
Out of everything that you have researched, and I know you're going to continue to update things on your website, what is the one takeaway that you want parents to know about?
You're not alone. And if you feel like you are having information withheld, that's probably valid. There should be reporting pathways for you. There should be next steps and escalation steps, and your child should be safe at school. So while knowledge is power, so is the ability to affect change and to keep your children safe. And I think we really do need some stronger language around that and the reporting mechanisms, but we also need the enforcement. So my website, schoolboardresearch.ca, is more on the academic side, but I will be doing more smaller articles. And I do ask people to reach out to me if they need clarification on any points, because there are some key policy points that even the schools get wrong. Please don't hesitate to reach out. If you have that question, other parents probably do as well. And I'm happy to write it in plain language so that you can pass that on.
I want to thank you for your time and your support, and I look forward to additional conversations as we help propel change.
Absolutely. I'm here to make sure that it's a safe and inclusive environment for all students.
My guest today has been Elizabeth Lance. She is the founder of schoolboardresearch.ca, a citizen led research initiative on safe schools policy in Ontario and public school boards.